So he didn't even pitch for the Cardinals. He may have pitched once, I can't recall, but no more than once before the strike hit. But then really took off once the strike was settled in August. Really established himself as a stopper in the Cardinals' rotation for the rest of 1981.
All right, so would you be able to describe to us Herzog's decision to roll with Tom Hare as a starting second baseman?
Well, he had performed very well in the Cardinals minor league system for 4 or 5 years to that point. Was brought aboard as a shortstop. He really didn't care for that position. He really thought of himself as a natural second baseman. But at that time, when he was coming through the system, the Cardinals had a player named Ken Oberkfell, who was a great defensive second baseman. They asked Oberkfell if he would move to third base, and he did so, and he performed well there too, opening the spot for her at second. And going back to Ken Reitz for a moment, Ken Reitz had been a solid Cardinal for several years in the 70s, but he was one of the slowest base runners in baseball, so he didn't fit into that Herzog mold for sure, and I think Reitz knew that. But in December of 1980, when Herzog makes many of his famous trades to build the Cardinals, he was wheeling and dealing at the winter meetings in December of 1980. One of the moves he made was to trade Ken Reitz to the Cubs, and one of the players Herzog got in return was the great closer Bruce Sutter. So trading Reitz opened up a spot for her in moving Oberkfell to third base.
Okay, and why did Herzog sign Darrell Porter?
Another great question, and actually that is a great history there. That was Herzog's first major move when he became general manager. He became field manager in June of 1980. And then shortly thereafter, Gussie Busch, the owner of the Cardinals, fired the general manager and gave that role to Herzog as well. And when that happened, Herzog wanted to take some time off from the field and evaluate the organization's farm system, and also scour the other rosters of the other teams for trades. So he handed over the field manager reins to Red Schoendienst, and then started working on deals he could make to strengthen the club. And Porter had been his catcher. Herzog, of course, had been a great manager for the Kansas City Royals. Never quite got over the hump and won a World Series, that's why he was fired by Ewing Kauffman in Kansas City. Porter had been a solid all-star catcher for him for several years. When Herzog made Porter his first major acquisition in December of 1980, a lot of eyebrows were raised because, first of all, the Cardinals had Ted Simmons, a longtime all-star catcher already, but also Porter had battled drug and alcohol problems for several years in his career, had seemed to have conquered them, but people wondered if he could fully come back from that and be, an all-star catcher again. And interestingly enough, the move was predicated on Ted Simmons going to first base and Keith Hernandez moving to left field, which is, of course, Simmons probably an average defensive catcher, but Hernandez a great defensive first baseman, as you guys know, in New York.
Yeah. Right.
But Hernandez was open to it, and Simmons originally said he was open to moving to first, but then through his agent, Simmons told Herzog, no, I don't want to move after all. So that kind of threw Herzog's plan into disarray, but ultimately Herzog was able to strike a deal with the Milwaukee Brewers to send Simmons there, and Porter was given the catching job. Hernandez stayed at first, and that became the Porter move became the first major transaction of you could say of Herzog's era as general manager.
Talking to Doug Feldmann, the author of Whitey Herzog Builds a Winner. So, how specifically did Herzog steal Willie McGee from the Yankees by trading just Bob Sykes for him? I'm still not over it, Doug. I'm still not over it.
Not a bad deal for a Cardinals fan, huh?
Definitely not, but for a Yankee fan, it was hell.
Well, it's funny because at that time, interesting backstory there, George Steinbrenner was kind of catching on to the running game that was emerging in baseball in early 1980s, and it signed Ken Griffey Sr. Had signed a couple other speedy outfielders at the time, and there just wasn't seen as room for McGee, and needed a left-handed pitcher. And Bob Sykes had shown promise with the Cardinals. He was solid in his couple of years with the Cardinals, but McGee was just he had been an all-star in Double-A, but was just kind of seen as an also-ran and an expendable by the Yankees. So not much was thought of the deal. Another thing I think that contributed to it was the fact that the Yankees were, of course, in the World Series against the Dodgers in the fall of '81, and that's when the deal took place. And that's, I think, another reason why it was under the radar. People didn't think much of Sykes, didn't think much of McGee, just kind of a ho-hum deal, and happened during the World Series, so attention was elsewhere. And the Cardinals definitely got the better of it.
Did Bob Sykes even pitch for the Yankees? I don't think so.
I don't believe so. I don't think he pitched in the majors again.
Oh, good God Almighty!
My recollection.
Sounds like a sweet deal. So what?
Yeah, one of the great steals. I live in the Cincinnati area now, and people still bemoan, as Susan Sarandon said in Bull Durham, Frank Robinson for Milt Pappas. So people around here still
and Brock Fabrolio too.
Okay, what did Herzog see in Lonnie Smith that convinced him to trade for Smith?
Kind of a parallel with McGee. Lonnie Smith had been a full-time player a little bit for the Phillies, but wasn't really a regular starter. And Herzog's assistant general manager got wind of the fact that the Phillies needed pitching. So what they did, they worked a three-way deal with Cleveland and the Phillies. Smith, I think, Lonnie Smith just kind of fit that role that Herzog was looking for in terms of, just an exciting guy at the top of the lineup. He said, and of course, his famous nickname, Skates. He wasn't so great defensively because he looked like he was on roller skates when the ball was hit towards him. But actually, Herzog thought he was very underrated as an outfielder. Made some great plays, made some great throws from time to time. But Herzog once said that if they had the designated hitter in the National League, Lonnie Smith would have died a Cardinal because he just brought so much to the table offensively, and it's just that spark plug at the top of the lineup Herzog was wanting.
Yeah, definitely. So can you lay out for us Herzog's rationale in trading for Ozzie Smith?
Yeah, his frustration with Gary Templeton.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it.
In August, if you recall the story, August of '81 was the infamous story of Templeton flipping off the crowd at Busch Stadium, and he didn't as the story goes, didn't hustle down to first base on a ground ball, and the fans let him have it, and then he let the fans have it, and Herzog dragged him back into the dugout by the arm. Players had to separate the two, and then they calmed down and talked about it afterwards, but Herzog said, at that point he was an ex-Cardinal. I mean, at that point they were looking to get rid of him. But Herzog also convinced Gussie Busch that they couldn't make a move right away because they really had nobody to fill that role. And it's interesting because I'm in education, and I kind of liken it to not getting the best out of a student. As Herzog said, when I talked to him on the phone, Herzog said that his one regret in his career, his one great regret, is not getting the best he could out of Gary Templeton. Templeton didn't want to play a day game after a night game. He didn't want to play the second game of a doubleheader. He didn't want to play in Montreal. He didn't want to play in this or that city. He said, but the other 81 games of the year, he was great. But the two reconciled over the years. Of course, Templeton went on to become a minor league manager himself. So, I mean, he matured and learned his lessons. But Herzog said after that incident, he couldn't keep him in St. Louis. So he saw Ozzie Smith as the guy who would perfectly fit, again, that AstroTurf role as a shortstop in St. Louis, and that worked out pretty well as well. And Templeton had some solid years for San Diego, not quite like the offensive years he put up in St. Louis, but he wound up being a decent player for the Padres as well.
All right, and I believe you hit on it a little bit before, but can you describe to us the thought process in trading for Bruce Sutter?
Another of the deals Herzog struck at the December 1980 winter meetings. 3 days earlier, the Cardinals had gotten Rollie Fingers from the San Diego Padres. And when the Cardinals traded for Sutter, Herzog talked to Fingers, and Fingers agreed to be on a staff with him. But ultimately, they saw that wouldn't work out. Fingers was sent to the Milwaukee Brewers as part of that big Brewers trade. But one of the keys Herzog sought for his team, in addition to running speed, was a dominant closer. He said that a dominant closer shortened games. Sparky Anderson with the Reds, you could say in the 70s, was the first to really use a bullpen deeply. But Herzog took that to a new level with the role of the closer, I think. And he saw what Sutter was doing with the Cubs. Sutter had a contract squabble with the Cubs, and even though he was really hitting his peak as a closer at that time, the Cubs were looking to deal him because he just couldn't come to a contract.
talking to Doug Feldmann, the author of Whitey Herzog Builds a Winner. And, Doug, I'll get you out on this. What exactly is Whitey Ball?
Whitey Ball is getting a runner on, just the old baseball story, I guess, of getting a runner on first, maybe bunting him over to second, stealing third if it's Vince Coleman, and then getting home on this, what you guys know from New York as well.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
Getting home on a sacrifice fly. It's Herzog believed in defense as well, and that's part of Whitey Ball also. He said it's hard to score a run, so it's just as important defensively to keep someone from scoring as it is to score one yourself. And that's another reason he signed Darryl Porter. He saw Ted Simmons as one, great offensive catcher, but just one that most teams would run on incessantly. And Porter wasn't, I think, remembered as one of the great throwing catchers of his era, but certainly solid and better than Simmons. And he believed he needed not just Porter's throwing arm, but his leadership. And that, of course, emerged in 1982 as Porter was MVP of not only the league championship series, but the World Series as well. So defense, getting runners on, moving them over, going first to third on a single, a lot of things we don't see so much of today in today's game. It seems like we're going back to the 90s with, home runs and strikeouts now. So you don't see a lot of Whitey Ball these days, that's for sure.
No, definitely not. All right, Doug, thank you for your time.
Thanks, guys, so much.
All right, take care. Have a great day.
Thank you.
All right, that was Doug Feldmann. His book is Whitey Herzog Builds a Winner. Let's take a quick break, but don't go anywhere because there's more of Beyond the Game coming up next on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
I'm Paul George of the Indiana Pacers. When I was 6, I had one thing on my mind. When I was 6, my days were spent playing basketball every chance I could. When I was 6, my dream was to make it to the NBA. When I was 6, my mom had a stroke. So I want you to learn the signs of a stroke fast. F-A-S-T. F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. Because the sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment. And that can make a remarkable difference in their recovery. I'm Paul George. Protect the ones you love. Spot a stroke F-A-S-T. Fast. Life is why. Visit strokeassociation.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
Yo, what happened to your hair?
You have to experience what I just experienced.
What'd you do? Stick your finger in an electric outlet or something?
Close. I just listened to Electric Air.
Electric air. Electric air.
Can everyone stop repeating electric air and tell me what electric air is?
Electric air will get your heart racing, neurons sparking, and lips smiling. Join me, Tova, as I shock your ears with EDM's greatest hits. 5 out of 5 doctors agree 1 hour of electric air every week is just what you need to increase your energy and leave you feeling stimulated. Side effects may include uncontrollable mood swings, shuffling, and in some extreme cases, headbanging.
Too much headbanging, huh?
Dude, those side effects are serious. Seriously amazing.
So join me every Wednesday night at 8 for Electric Air on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Jacob Volk. Jacob Volk. Jacob Volk. Jacob.
Are you trying to see how long it is until I can laugh?
Yes. You almost let it go to the end. That was impressive.
Thank you.
I like how you did that. You are listening to Beyond the Game on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I am Jacob Volk. You can follow me on Twitter at RealJacobVolk. Sitting across from me, Brandon Johnson. You can follow on Twitter at StephJohnson_. Dominic Arbolino, who you can follow on Twitter at Darbs5258. Eric Fischetti, who you can follow on Twitter at Sergeant Fish. And the true hockey maven, to hell with that other guy, can't say that enough, Eleanor Chompy, who you can follow on Twitter at ELLE Hockey Maven. Number to call if you have something on your mind, or to win some Long Island Ducks tickets for Tuesday, August 22nd at 6:35 p.m. is 516-572-7440. We got to get to hockey. According to Stephen Harris of the Boston Herald, the Bruins offered David Pasternak a 6-year deal